The wind howled like a living thing, tearing through the skeletal trees and icy rocks that surrounded the human's small hut. Snow whipped across the frozen plains in jagged sheets, blinding anyone who dared to step outside. Inside, the warmth from the small stove barely kept the chill away, but it was enough to remind him that he was alive. He had lived on this world for years, far from any colony or settlement, learning to survive when no one else could. The blizzards were brutal, but he had learned their rhythm, their cruelty, and their rules. He was sitting by the fire sharpening a knife when a flicker of movement caught his eye. At first he thought it was a trick of the storm, a shadow cast by the flames dancing on the walls. But then he saw it again, a shape moving against the snow, small and fragile, stumbling through the wind. His heart beat faster, not out of fear, but out of curiosity. Nothing should be moving out there, nothing alive. The figure approached his hut slowly, almost as if the storm itself was pushing it forward. As it got closer, he realized it was a being unlike any he had seen before. Tall, slender, with skin that shimmered faintly like moonlight on ice, and eyes that glowed a pale green in the dim light. It moved with a grace that was strange, almost alien, but each step seemed hesitant, frightened. The being stopped abruptly when it noticed him through the window. Its eyes widened and it pressed itself against the snowdrift, as if trying to disappear. He could see the panic, the raw terror in the way it shifted, almost like it expected him to attack or harm it, and for a moment he understood. It had been hunted, threatened, or betrayed. Fear was universal, but he had never seen it in this form. He opened the door slowly, letting the wind rush in, swirling snowflakes into the small room. "Hey," he said gently, keeping his voice low, steady, human. "Come inside. You'll freeze out there." Its gaze flicked to the knife in his hand, to the walls lined with tools and traps, and then back at him. It shook its head slightly and took a step back, pressing itself further against the snow. He could almost see the thoughts racing through its mind. Is this the end? Am I going to die? He dropped the knife onto the table, letting it thud heavily against the wood. "I won't hurt you," he said again. "I just want to help." It hesitated. The storm roared outside, and the hut seemed suddenly tiny against the vast emptiness of the frozen world. The being's movements became frantic. It looked around as if searching for another escape, a route the human could not block. But there was nowhere to go. The snow stretched for miles, unbroken, merciless. Finally, exhaustion won over fear. Its shoulders slumped slightly, and it stumbled forward, dragging one leg that seemed weaker than the other. The human held out his hand, not to grab, not to restrain, but just a gesture of peace. Slowly, hesitantly, it placed one delicate hand in his. The skin was colder than any snow he had touched, but surprisingly soft, like silk stretched over ice. He guided it inside, closing the door against the storm. Warmth hit immediately, a stark contrast to the frozen world outside. Steam rose from its damp hair and shimmering skin. He could see the faint outline of injuries, bruises, and cuts along the limbs. Its breathing was rapid, shallow, almost panicked, and he realized it had been running for a long time. "Sit down," he said, gesturing toward the bench by the stove. He poured water into a bowl and handed it to the being. It stared at the liquid, unsure if it was safe to drink. Finally, with trembling hands, it took the bowl, sipping slowly, cautiously, eyes never leaving him. "I won't hurt you," he repeated. "You're safe here. I can help you heal." The alien tilted its head, an expression that might have been curiosity or perhaps disbelief. It had never seen this before, a creature that could kill with ease, surviving in this harsh world, yet offering care instead of harm. Slowly it lowered itself onto the bench, folding its long legs beneath it. He knelt nearby, inspecting the cuts and bruises. Most were shallow, inflicted by sharp ice or rough terrain, but there were deeper marks along its arms, as if weapons had been used. He frowned, realizing that it had been hunted, deliberately. "Who did this to you?" he asked quietly. It flinched at the question, drawing its arms closer. Then it spoke, a language he could barely understand, melodic and strange, words that seemed to vibrate in the air. He shook his head, indicating that he didn't understand. It sighed, a sound like the wind passing through frozen trees, and tried again, slower, simpler. Hunting. Hunting, empire, escape, death. He nodded. He understood enough. It had fled from danger, from its own kind, from a force far more organized and powerful than either of them. And somehow it had ended up here, on this frozen world, in this tiny human hut, at the mercy of both the storm and whatever enemies trailed it. He worked quickly, cleaning and dressing the deeper wounds. He had no advanced medtech, only basic human tools. But his hands were steady, precise. The alien winced once or twice, but it did not resist. Trust, it seemed, was growing. Outside, the storm raged, shaking the hut, but inside, there was a fragile sense of safety. For a few hours, the world narrowed to two beings, one human, one alien, both survivors in their own way. The wariness, the fear, but also a spark of something else. A realization that maybe not all humans were enemies. The alien's voice was softer now, almost a whisper. "Why, help me." He shrugged. "Because I know what it's like to be alone, to fight the world and survive. And because humans aren't just fighters, we can be kind too." It tilted its head, considering this. There was a long pause, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the howl of the wind. Outside, the blizzard was unrelenting, a wall of white and ice. But inside, there was warmth, light, and a fragile understanding forming between two beings from different worlds. Hours passed. The alien leaned against the wall, exhausted but alive. The human kept watch by the door, listening for any sign of pursuit. The snowstorm made it impossible for anyone to track them easily, but he knew they wouldn't stop searching forever. Finally, he spoke. "You'll need to rest. Eat something. Tomorrow we'll figure out how to keep you safe. I can't promise everything, but I can promise this. No one will touch you here while I'm awake." It looked at him, eyes wide, reflecting the firelight, and slowly nodded. It had survived storms, hunts, and betrayal, but perhaps the hardest part was beginning to trust someone entirely different from itself. The wind outside began to die down slightly as night fell. The hut, a small island of warmth and life in a frozen wasteland, held them both. One from the stars, one from a world of ice, both facing an uncertain future. And in that uncertain future, trust had begun to take root, fragile as it was, a seed of hope in a brutal, frozen world. As he settled near the fire, he could not stop thinking about what lay ahead. Reinforcements would come. God. The aliens' enemies would not give up, but for now, they had a reprieve. And sometimes, he thought, survival was more than endurance. It was the choice to act with humanity when no one else expected it. Outside, the blizzard raged and died in unpredictable bursts, but inside the hut, two survivors rested, silently preparing for the challenges yet to come. One night, one storm, one small hut. Small moments like this were all it took to remind him why humans endured where others failed. Because they were resilient. Because they could adapt. Because even in a frozen world filled with fear, they could offer kindness where none was expected. And for the alien, for the first time in her life, she believed it might be enough to survive. The first light of dawn filtered weakly through the frost-covered windows, casting pale shadows across the hut. Outside, the blizzard had lessened, but the world remained a vast expanse of white, harsh, and unwelcoming. Inside, the alien woman stirred, her long limbs stretching cautiously. testing the warmth of the small room. She had slept in fits, haunted by distant memories of being hunted, but the human had kept watch through the night, and she had survived. That alone was enough to keep her heart beating steadily, if not fully at ease. The human moved quietly, tending to the stove, pouring a small amount of water into a pot. The hiss of the heat and the aroma of boiled roots and preserved meat filled the space. He didn't speak at first. He wanted the alien to awaken on her own terms, not startled, not threatened. After all, he knew fear was powerful. It clouded judgment. It twisted trust. It could turn a friend into an enemy in seconds. She watched him carefully, her glowing eyes reflecting a cautious curiosity. Her species had long learned to survive through war and cunning, and while she had never trusted easily, she could not deny that the human's calmness and steady movements were different. There was no immediate threat in him, only competence. "Eat," he said softly, gesturing toward a bowl of simple food. "You need strength if you want to survive the day." She hesitated, her slender fingers hovering over the bowl. The scents were unfamiliar, yet not unpleasant. Hunger won over caution, and she began to eat, slowly, measuring each bite as if to test whether it was safe. He watched her quietly, neither pushing nor patronizing, simply offering the space for her to choose. When she had eaten enough to satisfy her immediate hunger, she looked at him, a question in her glowing eyes. He tilted his head, silently asking her to explain. She began to speak, hesitating, careful with her words. Her voice was soft but melodic, carrying tones that were strange to his ears. He could not understand fully, but he caught fragments: hunters, empire, escape, punishment. She had fled from her own kind. They had hunted her relentlessly, labeling her a traitor for questioning their orders, their control. She had seen worlds destroyed, entire colonies erased, and now somehow she had survived until this frozen planet became her refuge. He nodded slowly. He understood the meaning, even if he didn't understand the words. Trust was not built in a single conversation, nor by force. It grew in shared survival, in acts of care, in recognition that the other's life mattered. "You're safe here," he said simply, "at least for now." She studied him carefully, searching for deception, for a hidden blade, a trap, anything that might betray his words. But she found none. She saw only a human, ordinary yet extraordinary, in the way he had endured this frozen wasteland. His hands were rough, scarred from survival, yet they moved with precision and care. His eyes, brown and steady, watched her with intent, but not aggression. Hours passed. The alien woman began to relax, though only slightly. She spoke less, conserving energy, letting her body recover. The human tended to her wounds with care, improvising where he could not rely on technology. He used heated stones to warm bruised limbs, cleaned shallow cuts with boiled water, and wrapped them with cloth strips. He did not rush, and his patience itself became a form of healing. By mid-morning she was able to stand. She moved carefully, testing her strength and balance. The human offered a steadying hand, but she shook her head, insisting she could manage. She moved toward the window and looked outside. The endless white stretching to the horizon, endless and indifferent. The storm had not ended. It had merely paused. Even now, tracks in the snow indicated that others had been nearby, hunters perhaps, or creatures native to the planet, and she did not know. She only knew she could not remain in one place for too long. The human noticed her tension.
"They won't find you here," he said, though he could not be certain.
"This storm keeps most travelers away. And even if someone comes, you're not alone anymore." She considered his words. Her instincts screamed to flee, to hide, to never trust again. Yet the calm in his voice, the lack of immediate threat, the warmth of the fire, it all challenged her instincts. Slowly she nodded, allowing a small measure of trust to take root. He led her outside after a while, despite the cold, to help her adjust to the environment. The snow was sharp against her skin, and her breath formed visible clouds in the air. The human demonstrated how to move efficiently across the ice, using long, steady strides and careful foot placement. He pointed out weak spots in the snow, cracks in hidden ice, and how to conserve energy without exposing oneself to the elements. She mimicked his movements, stumbling at first, but gradually finding a rhythm. "Humans are different," she murmured, almost to herself. "Different in what way?" he asked. "Not like my people," she said slowly. "Not only strong, but kind and clever. You survive where others die." He smiled faintly. "That's what humans do. We endure. We adapt. And sometimes we surprise even ourselves." The day passed slowly. She learned to make small improvements to the hut, sealing gaps in the walls to keep the wind out. The human taught her how to prepare simple rations for survival, how to conserve warmth, and even how to track movement outside without being noticed. She watched him carefully, absorbing not only the techniques but also the patience and ingenuity that humans employed in situations others might deem impossible. As night approached, the alien woman sat near the stove again, wrapped in a thick blanket the human had fashioned from layers of old clothing. She watched the fire dance, hypnotized by the flickering light. She did not speak, but he sensed her thoughts. Her trust had grown, though slowly and unevenly. She wondered what other humans might be like, whether they all possessed this blend of resilience and compassion, this capacity to endure hardship without losing sight of morality. Then a sound outside cut through the quiet, subtle yet unmistakable. Footsteps crunching in the snow, deliberate and heavy. The human tensed instantly, eyes narrowing. He had expected this moment eventually. It was only a matter of time before her pursuers caught up. "They're here," he said calmly, though his body was coiled like a spring. She froze, panic flashing across her features. She had fled countless worlds, yet she had never encountered anyone like this human. Someone who faced danger with a steady gaze instead of fear. He crouched slightly, gesturing for her to stay behind him, to observe but not act rashly. The first silhouettes emerged from the blizzard. Advanced armor glinted faintly in the dim light, weapons slung in practiced readiness. The hunters had found her. She recoiled, but he placed a firm hand on her shoulder, grounding her. "Watch and learn," he whispered. "Humans survive because we adapt, not because we are stronger or faster. Watch." He moved with quiet efficiency, setting traps and using the environment to his advantage. He knew the weaknesses of the blizzard, the angles where visibility was low, the areas where snow could conceal motion. He guided the alien woman through the tactics, showing her that survival was more than running. It was about understanding, anticipating, and exploiting weaknesses. The hunters hesitated, assessing the situation. They expected a scared human, a simple opponent, perhaps even willing to surrender. They underestimated the environment, underestimated the human, underestimated the determination born of countless years of surviving. Where others failed, hours passed in tense observation and subtle skirmishes. The human forced the hunters to retreat, using clever diversions and traps fashioned from snow, ice, and basic tools. The alien woman watched in awe, realizing that humans had a way of turning the harshest conditions into allies rather than obstacles. Each move was deliberate, calculated, and brutally effective, yet not cruel. The hunters left battered but alive, a lesson rather than slaughter. When the danger receded, the alien woman looked at him with new understanding. Fear still lingered, but awe and respect replaced some of it. "Your people, they are different," she said softly. "Stronger than we believed, smarter, and kind even when it is not required." He nodded. "That's what humans do. We endure. We protect. We adapt. And sometimes we save others, even when we do not have to. As night settled over the frozen plains, the two sat near the fire, silent but connected. Outside, the world was harsh and unrelenting, yet inside the hut there was warmth, knowledge shared, and a fragile trust forming between two beings from different worlds. She had escaped death that day, not because of superior speed or power, but because of the human's ingenuity, patience, and refusal to act as expected. But for the alien woman, it was a revelation. The universe was bigger and stranger than she had imagined, and humans were a force not to be underestimated. And for the human, it was a quiet affirmation of his existence. Survival was not just about endurance. It was about knowing when to act, when to care, and when to teach others the strength of humanity, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Tomorrow, the blizzard might return. Tomorrow, the hunters might regroup. But tonight, two survivors rested, bonded not by blood or species, but by shared experience, resilience, and the fragile beginnings of trust. In the frozen wilderness, humanity had not only survived, it had demonstrated why it could not be dismissed, even by the stars. The wind had died down to a dull roar, but the world outside the hut was still a frozen wasteland, white and endless. The human and the alien woman had spent the night preparing, but sleep had been shallow. Both knew the hunters were clever, relentless, and would not give up. The storm had given them a temporary advantage, but that window was closing. As the first pale light of morning spread across the snow, faint shapes appeared on the horizon. The human squinted, recognizing the armored forms immediately. The hunters had returned, more organized this time. There were at least a dozen, their movements precise, coordinated. They were prepared, armed with weapons designed for a hunt, not a battle. The alien woman froze at the sight. She had fled countless worlds before, but now she saw humans in their element. Her fear was tempered by fascination. This man, ordinary by human standards, faced such odds with quiet certainty. He did not panic. He did not hesitate. His mind worked like a machine, analyzing, predicting, and exploiting every detail. "Stay behind me," he whispered, motioning toward the center of the hut. "Watch carefully. Learn." Her glowing eyes widened. Watch? Learn? She had run from hunters all her life, relying on speed and stealth. Now she realized there was another way: strategy, ingenuity, and the raw ability to use your environment as a weapon. She nodded slowly, gripping the edge of the bench as he moved to position himself. He went outside first, stepping into the snow with deliberate calm. The hunters had already noticed him, their weapons raised instantly, aimed at his chest and head, but he did not run. He moved to the side, kicking up snow in a deliberate pattern to obscure his position, leading them into a narrow ravine that cut through the icy plains. The hunters hesitated, unsure. Their sensors were less reliable in such harsh conditions, and the snow obscured their vision. He had calculated this. The ravine was a trap, a funnel that would force them to approach in single file. From his vantage point, he could see every step they took, anticipate every move. The alien woman watched, amazed. His movements were simple, human, yet genius in their subtlety. Every footstep, every gesture, every choice of cover turned the environment into an ally. She could see the difference between raw strength and applied intelligence. Humans had survived, thrived, and dominated because of this ability to adapt. The hunters began to advance, cautious but confident. They had technology, weapons designed for lethality, and yet they moved as if unsure. The human had made the snow an extension of himself, turning it into obstacles, signals, and cover. Rocks balanced precariously on ridges, toppled with careful nudges, sending smaller avalanches toward the hunters. Snow and ice slid under their feet, slowing them, forcing them to stumble. One of them fired, a laser bolt that melted a chunk of ice near the human. He rolled aside, barely avoiding the shot, and launched a simple countermeasure. A series of weighted nets hidden in the snow that tangled legs and slowed the hunters. Their confidence faltered. They had underestimated the environment, underestimated him, underestimated the unpredictable nature of humans. Inside the hut, the alien woman watched and learned. She saw the patience, the precision, the foresight. Every trap, every move, was designed not to kill recklessly, but to control, to guide, to survive. Her heart raced as she realized that this human was showing her a new form of strength, one that combined instinct, intellect, and fearlessness in the face of impossible odds. Hours passed in tense confrontation. The hunters attempted to regroup, calling signals, trying to flank, but the human anticipated each movement. He used simple materials, ice, snow, rocks, and his knowledge of terrain. One by one, the hunters were slowed, caught, or forced to retreat. They were skilled, but the human's adaptability was superior. He had survived storms, harsh climates, and isolation. Survival was in his blood. The alien woman could hardly believe what she saw. He was ordinary by appearance, yet extraordinary in effect. He moved like a force of nature, using the environment as an extension of himself, turning their own strength against them. It was not brute force, but a demonstration of patience, observation, and cleverness. Humans, she realized, were unpredictable because they thought differently, acted differently, survived differently. One hunter attempted to circle behind him, thinking the human would focus on the main group. The man had anticipated this. A carefully arranged pile of ice and snow collapsed, forcing the hunter back, tripping him and sending him sprawling. Another hunter lunged forward with weapons blazing, only to fall into a concealed snow pit the human had dug earlier. Every move, every choice was methodical, almost effortless in execution. The alien woman felt something she had never felt before: awe, tempered with respect, and a flicker of hope. Humans were not just dangerous in direct confrontation. They were dangerous in mind, in adaptation, in will. This man, this human, had no advanced weapons, no overwhelming numbers, yet he controlled the battlefield entirely, and he did so without needless cruelty. Each hunter was slowed, hindered, but not destroyed, unless absolutely necessary. Survival, not vengeance, was the priority. By midday, the hunters were exhausted, frustrated, and retreating. They had underestimated the human, misjudged the environment, and failed to adapt. The alien woman realized that she had learned more in one morning than she had in a lifetime of fleeing. She saw why humans were feared and respected across the stars, not because of raw power, but because of resilience, cunning, and unpredictability. The human returned to the hut, breathing heavily but unharmed. He closed the door behind him, shaking snow from his coat. The alien woman moved toward him, her glowing eyes wide with a mixture of relief and amazement. You are different," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Your people, heck, they survive or others fail. You turn the world itself into a weapon." He shrugged, as if it were simple, natural. "We survive because we have to, and because we think differently. We use what we have, even if it seems ordinary, even if it's just snow and rocks." She nodded slowly, absorbing the lesson. Her species had relied on speed, power, and intimidation. Humans relied on adaptability, ingenuity, and endurance. That combination made them dangerous in ways that were difficult to predict. And now she understood. This human had saved her life not through superior strength, but through intelligence and persistence. For the first time, she allowed herself to relax, even slightly. The hunters had not found them. She was alive, and she had witnessed firsthand what made humans extraordinary. The fire inside the hut seemed warmer than before. a symbol not just of physical warmth, but of trust, safety, and the start of something she had never thought possible: hope. They spent the rest of the day reinforcing the hut, preparing for the inevitable return of the hunters. The alien woman learned to set simple traps, to observe and anticipate movements, and to use the environment as an ally. The human taught her patience, how to conserve energy, and how to plan 3 steps ahead. By nightfall, she was exhausted but empowered. She no longer felt helpless. She had learned to survive not just by running, but by thinking, adapting, and trusting. As they sat by the fire that night, the alien woman looked at him with a new sense of respect. "I see now," she said quietly. "Humans, we underestimated you. You are stronger than we knew. Not only in body, but in mind. You survive because you endure, because you adapt, because you refuse to be predictable." He smiled faintly. "And sometimes," he said, "we survive because we help others, even when it's not required, even when it's dangerous." She looked down, her mind racing with possibilities. If humans could do this on one frozen world, what could they do across galaxies? What power did this species hold when it combined intellect, resilience, and compassion? She realized that the universe had underestimated humans, as her empire had underestimated her, and that both mistakes could be costly. Outside, the wind whispered through the frozen plains, signaling that storms would return, that danger was never far, and that survival was never guaranteed. But inside the hut, there was warmth, learning, and an unspoken bond between 2 beings who had survived impossible odds together. The alien woman allowed herself to believe, for the first time in her life, that survival was more than running and hiding. It was planning, adapting, and acting with foresight. It was recognizing allies when they appeared, and perhaps most importantly, it was understanding that humans were unlike any species she had ever encountered. Unpredictable, relentless, and capable of extraordinary courage in even the harshest circumstances. And as she watched him repair simple traps and prepare for whatever came next, she knew that the next battle would not be easy. But she also knew that with humans by her side, the odds were no longer impossible. The night was long, darker than any the alien woman had ever known. Outside, the wind moaned across the frozen plains, carrying with it a warning: the hunters were regrouping. Their retreat yesterday had been tactical, not defeat, and she knew they would return with reinforcements. Yet, despite the fear that had always ruled her life, she felt something new: confidence, not only in herself, but in the human beside her. He had survived storms, blizzards, and superior numbers. He had survived because he understood the world in a way she never had. And now, she would see that understanding put to its ultimate test. Dawn broke slowly, pale light spilling across snow that stretched like an endless sea. The human had been awake for hours, preparing the hut and its surroundings. Snow piles were stacked to create natural barriers. Sharp ice spikes, hidden beneath drifts, acted as traps for anyone approaching blindly. Small fires were placed to create smoke and confusion, signaling danger to those who underestimated the terrain. He moved with calm efficiency, a silent predator in a world that demanded respect. The alien woman watched him, fascinated. Yesterday she had learned the value of patience, observation, and simple ingenuity. Today she would witness human resourcefulness at its peak. Her species had relied on speed and advanced technology to survive. Humans relied on adaptability, foresight, and courage that bordered on stubbornness. It was not strength alone that made them formidable. It was their refusal to be predictable. A sudden flurry of movement appeared on the horizon. The hunters had returned, now more numerous, their armor glinting faintly in the morning light. They moved in formation, weapons ready, clearly expecting a confrontation that would end quickly. But the human had anticipated this. He stood at the edge of the snowdrifts, calm, assessing every movement, every pattern, every weakness.
"Watch closely," he whispered to the alien woman.
Humans survive because we adapt. Sometimes the simplest tools become the deadliest. She nodded, her heart racing. This time, she did not feel helpless. She understood the environment, the traps, and, most importantly, the human's mind. She followed his instructions carefully, moving silently to check his improvised alarms and signal points. Each motion was deliberate, each observation a lesson. The hunters advanced, confident in their numbers. They were professionals, trained to track and eliminate targets with efficiency. Yet the snow betrayed them. Each step brought them closer to the traps. Each misjudged movement played into the human's plan. A carefully timed rock slide blocked their path, forcing them to split and hesitate. Another misstep sent a hunter tumbling into a concealed pit, his shouts echoing across the frozen plains. The alien woman gasped, a mixture of fear and awe. She had never imagined that survival could be turned into such an intricate game, where the environment itself became a weapon. Humans had learned to use everything around them, not just their strength or weapons, but ice, snow, and knowledge of terrain. This was a kind of war she had never seen before, precise, intelligent, and controlled. The human moved among the snowdrifts, unseen but fully aware of every hunter's position. He created diversions with minimal effort. A tossed rock here, a hidden snow pit there, small but effective disruptions that forced the hunters to scatter, stumble, and retreat temporarily. Each time they tried to advance, he was already 3 steps ahead. The alien woman found herself smiling faintly. She had fled countless worlds, relying on raw power and speed. Now she understood that humans were dangerous, not because they were stronger, but because they were unpredictable, clever, and unyielding. They turned even the harshest conditions into advantages. And this human, this one man, was a perfect example of everything her species had underestimated. Hours passed in tense maneuvering. The hunters regrouped, trying to coordinate, but the snow and wind worked against them. The human used the storm itself as a shield and weapon, forcing the hunters into predictable paths, where ice and snow created traps, where sudden avalanches disrupted their formation. Every move was calculated. Every decision was survival. At one point, a hunter attempted to flank from behind, thinking the human would focus on the main group. The human anticipated it. He triggered a hidden mechanism, releasing a small snowslide that forced the hunter back. Another attempted a direct attack, only to be caught in a concealed net that immobilized him. Without serious injury, the alien woman watched, heart pounding, as the human moved like a force of nature, his mind coordinating dozens of variables at once. By late afternoon, the hunters were exhausted, frustrated, and demoralized. They had underestimated not only the environment but the human's ingenuity. Slowly, reluctantly, they began to retreat. The alien woman allowed herself to breathe. They had survived again, not because of raw power, but because of intelligence, adaptability, and unshakable resolve. The human returned to the hut, snow-covered, but unharmed. He removed his outer layers, revealing a rugged, scarred body hardened by years of survival. He poured hot water into bowls, handing one to the alien woman, as she took it gratefully, sipping slowly, savoring not just warmth, but the quiet victory they had achieved. "You are remarkable," she said, her voice soft. "Your people survive where others fail. You use the world itself to your advantage. You do not rely only on strength or weapons. You survive because you adapt." He smiled faintly. That's what humans do. We endure, we adapt, and sometimes we survive because we help others, even when it is dangerous, even when it's not required. She nodded, understanding the lesson. Her species had always valued raw ability and obedience. Humans valued cunning, resilience, and choice. That difference made them unpredictable, unstoppable in ways her people had never anticipated. She realized that she had underestimated them, as her empire had underestimated her, and mistakes like that could be fatal. The sun began to set, painting the frozen plains in shades of gold and pink. The hunters were gone for now, and the alien woman felt a rare sense of peace. She had survived storms, hunts, and betrayal, but she had also learned something more: the value of trust, intelligence, and resilience. The human had not only saved her life, but had taught her to see survival in a new way. She stood near the window, looking out at the endless snow.
"What now?"
she asked. He shrugged. "We wait, we prepare, and we survive. The universe is dangerous, but so are humans, and sometimes that's enough." She turned to him, eyes glowing softly. "I will tell others. Your people, they are more than I imagined."
"They are. Extraordinary."
He nodded, understanding the weight of her words. It was not just a promise or compliment. It was a warning and recognition. Humans were unpredictable, resilient, and capable of extraordinary acts. Across galaxies and worlds she had never known, the reputation of humanity would grow not because of conquest, but because of survival, ingenuity, and the courage to act when others would falter. That night they rested near the fire, side by side but not touching, silent but connected. The alien woman allowed herself to trust, to hope, to learn from a species that had survived against impossible odds. She had fled from countless dangers, but now, for the first time, she felt secure, not because the threat was gone, but because humans were there, capable of facing what others could not. Days later, she would leave the planet, return to her people, and carry with her a story that would ripple through the stars. Humans were not merely another species. They were survivors, unpredictable and unstoppable, capable of feats no anticipated. And that knowledge would change the way others saw humanity forever. For the human, life would return to its usual rhythm. The hot, the snow, the storms, they were all part of survival. But he knew that the impact of their encounter would stretch far beyond the frozen plains. A single act of kindness, intelligence, and endurance could echo across galaxies. Humans survived not because they were cruel or mighty, but because they were resilient, clever, and willing to act when others would hesitate. Outside, the frozen world remained harsh and unyielding. Storms would return. Hunters would continue their pursuit. The galaxy was dangerous, and survival was never guaranteed. Yet inside the small hut, two beings rested. One human, one alien. Bound by trust, understanding, and the shared experience of facing overwhelming odds together. And as night fell over the endless white, the alien woman knew she had witnessed something extraordinary. Humans were more than survivors. They were a force the galaxy could not ignore. She would carry that lesson back to her people, and perhaps one day, the story of a human in a frozen hut saving an alien would become legend. For now, she allowed herself to rest. Tomorrow would bring challenges. But humanity had shown her a new way to survive, with intelligence, courage, and a willingness to defy expectations.
And that, she realized, was more powerful than any weapon, any army, or any empire.
In the heart of a frozen world, amid storms and silence, humanity had not only survived, it had shown why it was destined to endure, to inspire, and to leave its mark on the stars.